Good morning. Welcome to episode 60 of the Critical Fools podcast. This week we'll be discussing a 2020 film that's very, I think timely for this current era, called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. It's a mouthful. Directed by Eliza Hittman. It won the Silver Jury Prize at the 70th Berlin International Film Festival. It's a film that tackles one of the big cultural issues of our time, abortion. And I will leave it there just to hear your initial reaction after you watch the film in its entirety.
It was actually a really good film, I thought. Sort of, this film goes through the progression and sort of the feelings and the journey of a girl who's very young. She's a teenager. I believe she's 17 in this film. Correct me if I'm
17.
wrong.
17.
But she deals with sort of isolation, not a very good family life. Ends up having pregnancy, and she's scared, and it sort of shows her going through her progression in sort of this isolated world. Yet she has her cousin who's there for support on her journey, going through one of the most difficult decisions I think anybody could ever make. And I think they did a really good job humanizing and going through the emotions of someone in that situation. Now, I can't speak because specifically because I'm not a woman, but I could sort of empathize through, what one might go through.
I guess we'll leave the hot takes for me later, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so yeah, it's just to give the setup here. You're right. It's a 17-year-old teenager named Autumn. And she, it's insinuated that, she, how do I say this nicely? Like, she fools around with many boys, and specifically one boy I guess she was sort of interested in. And it'll be revealed later that, more details around that stuff when she's getting questioned, but we'll hold off on that. But it's already kind of like it's already in the backdrop in the beginning. And she also, some more context, she also works at it's like a grocery store, convenience store.
Grocery store.
Yeah, with her cousin, and I believe her name was Skylar. And there's a specific scene I want to talk about later, but I want to get the backdrop. You're right, the family life. Her family life seems like it's like, her father is a alcoholic, it seems, right? It seems like that's the impression I get. I don't know if it's said explicitly, but he's got issues himself. He's got this, the eye of a man that's kind of like beat down in life and maybe unhappy with his circumstance. And the mom, I guess, tries to plug in the holes, but she's in the backdrop of this domineering.
Well, I think she's also, to an extent, like an alcoholic as well, but it's not really expressly said.
That's true.
Because every scene I've seen her in, she was drinking a Yinlin. Shout out to the East Coast references. People on the West Coast don't know what that is.
Hold on. I was going to get into that. This film also takes place in Pennsylvania, which I think is also very attuned to the political climate of our current time. Pennsylvania is you would now consider probably a swing state in many ways because of the recent changes in our politics. And that's highlighted with this, right now, as we're recording this on October 30th, 2022, with this tough Senate race. But yeah, like, you're right. You could argue there's an insinuation that the mom was also an alcoholic. And I think the father's name, for clarification, is Ted. And the mom's her name is never explicitly said. And yes, you're right. We're going through the journey of, to give you the audience like a structure for what the setting, climax, and resolution is that her dilemma is that she's pregnant, would like to get an abortion, but can't do it in her state, which is going to become
without her parents' knowledge.
Without her parents knowing, which is going to become more of a even thing as we move forward, right, with our society. And she doesn't feel, obviously, given the backdrop of her family life, doesn't feel comfortable going forward. So her and her cousin hatch a plan to go to the city of New York, because you can do that, via bus from Pennsylvania.
Your city.
That's not my city in that regard. Anyways, yeah, so she has this backdrop, and so obviously one of the issues also, sorry to add to the last detail before we get into more of the scenes that I would like to discuss, is she also clearly comes from like the lower middle class, right? Like she doesn't have the money to just get on a
Bordering on
bus.
working class.
Yeah, so this is the opening, like an early scene that I'd like to get into, is she ends up they end up stealing, her and her cousin end up stealing from the what's called the convenience store. And then there's this weird scene where the guy
it's a grocery store. It's clearly a grocery store. I don't know what you call it.
Okay,
store.
yeah, sorry, whatever. A grocery store, and there's this awkward scene.
It's not a bodega, Chris. Sorry, I'll let you get into it now.
Okay, there's this awkward scene where they do take the money, and then the guy, I guess their boss behind the window, what's it? I don't know. Caresses.
I don't know. It doesn't, no. This is yeah, I know what you're talking about, but he does it multiple times in the movie.
Yeah, so I'm curious to like, how did you take that scene? What you think the director was trying to show?
What do you mean? It was uncomfortable. I don't know. This movie, I'll give them credit. They did a great job at making you feel uncomfortable in many scenes. That was but one of them. And yeah, I think it was just kind of highlighting position of power, like how people can abuse those that are under them. I think that's kind of what it was trying to show, and how you feel pressure to sort of conform to situations that you otherwise would not want to.
I actually want to go deeper. It's one of the issues I have with this film. A big issue is that all female characters are in this, if you think about it, are either victims or they're helpers. And all male characters really are, vile, basically. Right, the dad's pretty, broken, vile. This guy's a creeper. The Jasper guy,
yeah, everybody is, a creeper.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's something I don't know if many people picked up on, because I saw some reviews, but that's something that I picked up on, and I'll get into my final thoughts. But that's something that I think the film does a disservice, because I think you could have easily replaced many of the female maybe characters. Let's say we get to the Planned Parenthood part with some male people, and it's probably closer to what reality is, because there are many male nurses and doctors, but that's not what the film chose to do. And I think there's an explicit decision for that. I'm convinced.
It's got its own agenda too, in many ways. I think
this film is an agenda-based film, but we'll get to my final thoughts. Anyways,
sure.
But I pick films that challenge me. That's why I picked it, even though I'll rip it to shreds.
I will say the acting in this was phenomenal, like especially from.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
What I will say too is, you were sort of, I guess, you're making comments about the history of the main character. I think tying it together, that the fact that she was promiscuous from a young age kind of stems from the fact that she never really got any affirmation or love from her dad. I think that was partly what they were trying to show. So she was trying to seek attention elsewhere from other males. And that's what kind of led her to that path.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So they do get the money in a weird way. They pretty much steal it, and they take yeah. So their plan is to get the money.
Either way, though, I will tell you that that scene of the dude kissing their hand, that made me so uncomfortable. I had to turn away. I don't know why.
I did get a little sick. I was just like, what's with this?
What is going on? I was like, I did not like that at all.
Is this an incel? Anyways, but anyways, their plan is to get this money, go to New York, get the procedure. Oh, sorry, I missed one detail. There was the early scene where she does go to the clinic, and they tell her, and we later learn that it's wrong, right? That she's only 10 weeks along. But I think it's like later. I don't know what they reveal later, but it's way later.
By the way, when the lady, and she was sweet and she was trying to be helpful, although you could definitely tell she was pro-life. When she shows you that video about the dangers of abortion, I couldn't help but laugh, just because, not because of the situation. This is a very serious film, but because I've seen so many of those sort of institutional kind of shock value, poorly shot quality films that it just triggered this like nostalgia of certain moments. Like I remember being 15 and a half taking my driver's, instructor's class in California, and they showed us like the dangers of like accidents. And I remember that clearly there was something that was shot. It was called like what was it? Red Asphalt was the title of the film, and it showed like these terrible accidents in driving, kind of shock value. I don't know why, but that just triggered that recollection, and I was like, man, what is it with some of these like instructional videos and just being shot in such terrible quality, like they're from the 70s?
It's called budget. Not everybody can have that budget. But yeah, I forgot. So she does go to the clinic to confirm.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is probably right around before they steal the money. So I skipped that detail. And so yeah, right. That scene's actually, I'll give the movie credit. Like that scene, contrast to when she goes to New York version, you see the difference in like, the questioning and the attitude. Which I think is actually a good compare contrast, actually,
Sure.
in terms of art, not just a film, but wider commentary on society. But yeah, she's told that it's 10 weeks, and you're right, the dangers and like all the other options like adoption.
It's always adoption.
Yeah, all this other stuff, and obviously she's decided. Oh, no, sorry. Before we even get there, she tries to deal with it herself by doing an age-old technique of miscarriage. So she starts swallowing. I forgot what kind of pill she starts swallowing, but she starts trying to punch herself.
Vitamin C, too, I believe.
Okay, I don't know.
I might have misread the label, but I was like, okay, you're trying to like overload your body with vitamin C because it might kill the fetus, but not yourself. It wouldn't necessarily harm yourself.
Yeah, and then she starts. I can't recall. I know she's just taking something to try to like induce a miscarriage, and she starts trying to punch herself.
Yeah, well,
that was uncomfortable. If you're talking about being uncomfortable, I was a bit uncomfortable.
No, it was uncomfortable many times in this movie.
Yeah, but yeah, that scene where she's punching her stomach, I was like, damn. Anyways, so I forgot that's another important thing. So what did you think of that kind of stuff? Like, it portrays something that's not often portrayed on TV, induced miscarriages. And miscarriages is a really hot topic for women. I do know that women have miscarriages, pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's you can see it, and I think this is what I was talking about with the acting in her face, because it was tough to watch. But yeah, you could tell this is a girl who's very conflicted. You could tell about what she wants to do, and I think she did a great job sort of showing that. Because she's punching herself, but at the same time, like she looked like she was going to have a breakdown at any moment. And it's a situation it's tough, man. I mean, like when you go through teen pregnancy and trying to showcase what some people will do because they feel desperate. So, I mean, I don't know what else you want to get from me. It was uncomfortable. I thought this whole film was just uncomfortable, just overall.
No, I mean, this is fine. I'm not trying to get any deeper. Just making sure I'm not just the one monologuing here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then you see like when she goes to New York and she lifts up her shirt and you see all the bruises. Yeah, that was uncomfortable, man. I don't know how anyone could watch that film and not feel uncomfortable.
Men who are perpetrators themselves. Anyways, the
sociopaths. That might be the only one.
Yeah. So they get on the bus, right? And then that's where they meet another pivotal character that will become important. Jasper. I'm gonna just describe him as a horny teenage boy or a young, not boy.
No,
he's
older.
Young, right?
He was 21. No, he
21.
was buying beer.
Oh, okay. So he's 21.
Yeah.
So again, we can
At
talk about
least 21.
We could talk about the age dynamic in a sec, but so they meet him and he's really trying to, get him to hang out, and he wants to get with the cousin Skylar. It's very clear. They're not in the this is how women are, like they're not in the mood for that, so like they're just focused on their goal, getting in and getting out. So they're just being polite, but it's very obvious they're like, yeah, we want to not talk to you, but he'll become important later, obviously. So they get on the bus, they meet that guy, and then they get to New York, and actually this is something not related exactly to the plot line, but what happens to them in New York is exactly what happens to many people for their first time.
Oh, when they get to the train station?
Yeah, they're lost. They don't know what to do.
That's what happened to me when I came to visit you, and I was just like, in Grand Central, like, where do I go? Am I about to go to Long Island? You live out in that direction. I had no idea.
And they're lost too. They're lost and they don't know what ticket to use or whatever. And they don't have a lot of money, so they can't make big mistakes. They don't like, and where they're staying is also like very budget. And yeah, they're overwhelmed because it's very clear that they've only lived in their part of Pennsylvania their whole life.
Right.
So unrelated to like our serious plot, I did like find that kind of like relatable, and I found that kind of funny because I was like, damn, like a lot of I always hear all the time now, tourists are just like, I don't know where to go, I'm lost. I'm like, good luck. That's the New York response now. Good luck. You go this direction. But yeah, so they're overwhelmed and stuff. And then they, the next big scene really is like she goes to the New York clinic, right? The Planned Parenthood office there, where she learns that it's going to be a 2-day procedure because she's way further along than she was told.
Right. It's like a good 6 weeks, I believe. 6 weeks.
No.
7 weeks?
Oh, 6 weeks further. Yeah. No, that's. Yeah, I thought you meant like she's 6 weeks. No,
no,
told 10.
10 versus 16, right?
She was like 6 or 8 weeks further. Yeah. So it's gonna be like another. It's gonna be a 2-day
second trimester.
Yeah, it's gonna be a 2-day procedure, and she freaks out because obviously they didn't budget for that. Because now all the money they had to get back, they're gonna use it for that. So they gotta figure out how to get back. And Skylar gets desperate, says, "We should call your mom," and she says no. Again, speaking to the parental issues, right?
Right.
And we'll get into their fake little date night with Jasper later, but I think the real and critical scenes, obviously there's 2 at this part of the movie, the abortion scene, but also I would say the questioning scene. I will say this, I'll give the movie credit. The title comes from the line of questioning she got. Yeah. I'm curious what you thought of like, New York, but also that section of the film.
What do you mean by what I thought about New York?
No, I was just kidding on that. I was just wanting to see. You want to speak to your lost experience in New York?
No, I mean, generally, I feel like when I first got there, I was lost, but in general, for myself, like I'm pretty good at navigating. And whenever we've gone on trips, man, I'm always the one who is the
you're usually good at navigating.
So I figured it out.
But I was getting concerned when you called and you're like, "Do I get on Long Island?" So like, "Do not get on that train." I remember saying that.
Okay, to be fair, that Grand Central Station is huge.
It's the largest station in America.
Yeah, and there's so many different transit agencies that converge there. So yeah, I was confused for a minute because I had never been there before. But then once I get there, I will never make that mistake again.
Hold up, to correct it, it was Penn Station.
Penn Station. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, you guys in your stations up in the Northeast.
It's a lot of stations. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot, dude.
Actually, sorry I tried to tell you this before the podcast, but I learned because I did the race. I learned there's another ferry system I didn't know about.
See, I was like, yeah, that's my point.
I was like, wait,
going to where?
Going to Governor's Island, dude.
Oh, that's right. Oh, you need to go to that music festival.
Yeah, one day. But anyway, sorry, going back to the plot. Yeah, so what did you think of that scene with the questioning? Okay, so to set it up, right? Like she's questioned on, I guess, standard
history. It's like history type questions, making sure she's safe, all of that. In case they need to get like social services because she's under 18, and probably in case you need to get social services involved because you're in a bad situation. It's clear that she had gone through some abuse. It was hard for her to answer. The big issue is I feel like she didn't really have anyone to talk to through that. And being someone who's in 17 and you see, skyrocketing rates of depression, especially amongst teenage girls. Can just look at Jonathan Haidt's research. I feel like they did a good job of portraying someone who's in that age group in a bad situation, who's like lost and vulnerable. And that really came out with how she struggled to answer some of these questions. You could tell there was a lot there that she didn't really want to get into that she's been through. And it was tough. It was tough to watch, for sure.
Yeah, it was. Those like scenes towards like the especially in the New York City Planned Parenthood, where especially like I said, the question, it became obvious then that she, that she lacked a bit of education.
What I will say with this is not that they made it that it was such overt just sexual assault, but you're put into they did a good job of showing that there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they did a really good job with that. It wasn't just so like like I'm not trying to take away or saying that it's a bad thing. Like it's horrible when someone gets raped, but there's like a lot of nuance where it's like if you're with somebody, you know, they sort of pressure you into a certain sexual act that you don't want to do. Like that's more where you're starting to get in the gray area of murky waters, and trying to portray that. I think they did a good job.
Yeah, and I think it stems from like she didn't have that communication with her parents around this, right? Like I think also
No, of
like
course not.
yeah, she was learning this all from teenage boys, which is having been one myself once is probably not the best.
Dude, even teenage boys are like kind of clueless because some people just come from families that just don't want to talk about it, and then they try to figure it out.
And
like
they just
being a teenager is a confusing time for a lot.
And they just copy porn, as we know. Anyways,
exactly.
Yeah. And so yeah, the questioning became honestly it was creative. That's where the title comes from. And also I would say yeah, it became a very apparent that she was but what I was saying going back to the film was I don't remember. God damn. All right.
Were you talking about the questioning of the film, or like where the film's title comes from?
It was a creative way to say, but also like, yeah, I would say also with that scene, I think also to give actually validity. So I actually talked about this film with my mom, and she didn't watch the film. I think it's obviously even for anyone a big topic. But when I described this scene to her, she said that like from what I was describing, it was fairly accurate to a scene that to what she had gone through in her 20s.
Other people, sure, yeah.
And that like yeah, like and actually because at the time she was pregnant, it's I'll bleep that out later.
Okay. You're the editor.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a tastemaker. Anyways, I'm calling you a tastemaker now, because you know, you always have the clutch picks, you know. And but anyways, because at the time I actually learned something new through this conversation actually. So at the time, obviously, you know, it actually makes sense, right? My mom was a college student, so like she actually went to Planned Parenthood. So like a lot of this process, when she was just trying to find out if she was pregnant, it was a very similar questioning and stuff. And then and like yes, and they pretty much try not to demonize abortion because they want you to see it as a valid path, which we could argue, we can discuss a bit later if how we feel if you know where's the nuance you said there of like pushing it or not demonizing it, because I think it is a gray area that
not demonizing what exactly
having the abortion. Yeah, no, not like not like because again I was kind of surprised to hear from my own mom that like that there was no capping, there was no lying there. Like it is kind of like that, like they ask you those questions for your safety and stuff like that, and then they want you they want you to know it's a safe place, and like you know abortion could be the right choice in many ways, and sometimes it is for somebody of her age and stuff. And because and my mom was actually defending them in the sense that like they come from a place of understanding that for many people it's still seen as, especially in the early 90s, it's still seen as like don't do it, it's taboo, and like you should, you know, you're killing people. So they want to create a structure. But my mom did say like it also, if you think, she was like, she was young, but she said if you think though like yes, that's good, but like it's you're going through a thin line, because like then you know at what point do you just start, you know, just say like get it because it's best for you, you know, but it's not always about you. And like my mom was just like yeah, it makes it even more complicated.
It's a tough situation, man.
Yeah,
I mean I think like this film clearly comes from one point, but I remember even hearing like a Joyner Lucas song, who's a rapper. Now he's a male, but he talked about how he was brutal. I believe it was based on his life experience. It was a song called I'm blanking on the title, but it deals with abortion in the sense that I think he got his high school like girlfriend pregnant or something along those lines, and he wanted her to get an abortion, but she ended up having the kid, and the whole song is him rapping to his kid, saying that, you know, I'm sorry, like it was like at that time I thought I wanted something, and then now you're here. And like I think a lot of times there is an idea for some people of, you know, regretting having an abortion. That's not everybody, clearly, and that's not everyone's experience, but this is a very complicated kind of topic, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. And you know, it's not a decision to be made lightly.
Yeah, I mean, and since we're on this topic, before we jump into like the scenes of the procedure and their date, or the date with Jasper, you know, my mom told me that like, you know, you're right, it's very like not black and white, because you know you have your own beliefs, how you were raised, you also have like the time you're in. And to your no, when you just said like some people like regret it, like that, I guess that rapper. On the
So
other
the
side,
song before you begin, so the song by Joyner Lucas is called "Forever."
yeah,
But anyway,
but like
go
on the other side, my mom does know that she had classmates that already had like 2 to 3 abortions.
uh-huh.
And it was, it was on the other side, like normalized to that degree. So you like to your point, there's a spectrum of like, didn't know what they want, like, that musician to like others who, like you said, whatever, it's just, it's not a life, So it's like, I'm not making a political statement here, but I'm just saying like you have a spectrum of like you said, like that's why it's very, I think, a hot topic, because there's not just like one side
Not a clear
is
answer.
this, yeah, and the other side is that. It's very like there's a spectrum, because some people go all the way to the other side,
Mhm.
pro-life, like, never ever. And
Yeah,
others
know some
are
people
all the
like
way,
that.
and then others are on the other extreme where it's like, oh, you know what? Like you can do it 10 times, it doesn't matter. And
Mhm.
like I think both sides are probably slightly too,
Extreme.
what's the term? Like too there's a word for this, right? Not just extreme, but like well, you don't see anything outside of your viewpoint.
Too much
Um,
tunnel vision.
yeah, and like you don't understand, like maybe it's like it's not as
It's a little
0
gray,
1.
not as black and
Yeah.
white.
And I think this film, I'm not expecting this film to do that because it's hard in the film, but I will say that it, like you just said earlier, it is from a certain viewpoint, and the characters and also the side characters paint that portrait.
Mhm.
Because I think it's easy to watch this film if you're on one side and say, oh, this is just liberal propaganda. And it's easy to watch this film on the other side and say, oh, see, this is why we're fighting so hard, because we have people in this country that shouldn't be able to vote and stuff because they're so backwards.
Mhm.
And I
It's
think,
a polarizing
unfortunately,
kind of portrayal in a way.
yeah, and I think, unfortunately, when you have this kind of film, you're going to be, this is why I give credit for having the gall to tackle the topic, but also the dangers of doing it, because you're not going to be able to, it's going to be, to me, super hard to have that kind of like incision point where like it's a good viewpoint on multiple perspectives. Because here, I'll be honest, and one critique I have of the film again is that it doesn't really give you, it gives you multiple perspectives, but from like, the pro-life clinic, it doesn't give you multiple perspective of like maybe somebody that like, I think that the musician example you gave was a great one, like that kind of perspective.
Oh
And
yeah, of Joyner's song. Yeah.
yeah, like you go 180 on a decision. Like it's just this film, I get it, it's hard, but I do think that this film definitely had a certain lens and wanted to portray things.
Yeah, I think my big issue with the film was, and this is where my ratings probably come down. I would have, if I was directing this film, I probably would have had a different direction for the end. But we can get into that in a bit.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Or no, I don't know.
We're getting there, yeah, because I think before, I forgot, is the fake Jasper scene before she gets the operation, or is it after?
So what Jasper scene?
The Jasper date, that weird.
That was the night before.
Okay, so let's get to that. Then we get to the scene.
Yeah.
So obviously going back to Jasper, so
they're out of money. It's basically
they're out of money because they got it. They have to use the last of their money for her 2-day procedure, which they didn't expect to be 2 days, and so they do the technique of as old as time. They use their sexuality to get what they want, and we'll get to that makeout scene and stuff, but. She
did. Oh man, and that's very uncomfortable too. But she did what she had to do to, survive in a way.
Yeah, and he takes him on this really awkward
date where she's third wheeling, but she's not really into him either. But she knows that she don't really have any other options in the city. She knows the dude's kind of into her.
Yeah,
it's a really awkward dynamic.
It's kind of messed up on all levels, really. But and yeah, it's like they have pizza and because they're underage and he's 21. And like they have the pizza, right? And then they're talking, and then yeah, obviously it's another, to your point about being uncomfortable. It's another uncomfortable scene.
The whole movie was uncomfortable.
And then like there's that I was gonna specifically talk about that makeout scene where like she's making out with him, and then
she's holding her hand.
They're holding her hand, and this is also where she swipes the money or the ass. I forgot.
Later. And so she asked for the money, and he's like, "All right, why don't you stay here? I'm gonna take her outside. We're gonna go find an ATM. I'll get the money." And she's like, this is the main character, like, okay. And then she like kind of freaks out and goes looking for them later and finds them making out.
I gotcha. Yeah.
And then afterwards, they go to the ATM after that scene.
Yeah, he wasn't gonna not get his transaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chill out there, dude. Chill out there, because this girl's also like, he's above 21 and she's 17. So
I do want to talk about the age though, but I meant
go murky waters, dude.
Well, I mean, the thing is that like I'm talking about when I say transaction, I mean like from the male perspective. Let's generalize it beyond.
Yeah, no, dude, but he's kind of creepy because I think he couldn't quite.
All the men in this film are creepy, which is another thing I already complained about in this film. But what I mean is that the age dynamic it's an interesting take here because I think it's valid. I think it's fine for the story. Obviously this character shouldn't be doing any of this. It's clear cut. But I think if I were to take because I'm a philosopher, a general picture, I would say like this is the problem men have. I'm actually criticizing men here. Actually, is like they will take a girl out to a date, get her dinner, and just assume they expect that they should be smashing later, and that's wrong, and that shouldn't be the case. And I think unfortunately that's what I mean. Like, I don't know if they're doing this in this director, but like my take when I saw that was like it's a microcosm of like the male behavior of expectation because they do something.
Sure.
You should really, he really should have gave the money because he actually cared about their story or not and just walked away.
Well, I don't think, to be fair, I don't think he quite knew their story.
That's true. But either way, he should not have just used money as a tool here.
Yeah. Well, in a way, he was like he used it as leverage.
Yeah. And also, I mean,
I think he did realize they're desperate in some way or another, even though he didn't have the full story.
And to flip the transaction thing, and this is why I use that word because again, in this specific film, this is what the director knows what they're doing. In this specific film, the male actions and the situation is basically like, in my opinion, like trash. Like that guy is just a loser. If it was a real person, right? He's overage. They're 17. He has an age gap that's like not just like 24 to 30. It's like there's the legal thing, which I think in Pennsylvania is 16, by the way. But
they're in New York.
Yeah, they're in New York, so it's so shady. Which I have to double check the New York law. I don't even know. But and he's using money and all the things that like guys can use sometimes to manipulate a situation. Sometimes. Even though she's clearly not interested. But what I want to flip it on the other side of the transaction is that, look, I live in, as you know, New York, the audience, and I've been around women that have basically flaunted the fact that they use men this way for the free dinners, for the free whatever. And yes, these are older women, 22 to 25. So again,
yeah, I think you're not being fair because these girls are also in high school.
No, I'm saying that what happened in that situation, if the situation was real, is obviously like this guy's basically should maybe if it's legal go to jail. I'm trying to make a wider point here because again I'm a philosopher.
Okay.
And I'm saying like I'm basically doing my soapbox moment. Is that like let's say you remove this scene and you look at anybody above 22 to 28, and what I've heard at least in this city. Both sides. What I'm saying is that like here again, ignore the movie scene. Both sides here. When I say transaction, because what I'm trying to really get is that like unfortunately, both men and women are viewing each other as transactions. And maybe it's the power of capitalism and commoditization. But I've heard many women that use guys for like, hey, thank you for the dinner, or they just want to learn new spots. Like I'm gonna be honest with you, I was seeing a girl recently and I realized that it was going nowhere, but I look back and analyze like the conversations and realize that like she just wanted to know all the shit I knew about comedy, comedy clubs in New York, and I was just like, wow, that's just like low. It's like me asking, like, oh, give me all the recs you have for like cocktail lounge. Just like that's just because you want to use that later, obviously. But you're right. On the other side, men use women just assuming they take them out and treat them out that they deserve certain things when that's wrong. And I think a lot of the nuance that we talked about earlier about that gray areas is because there's expectations are not always the same, and also how people view each other are not the same. Now, going back to the film, honestly, that Jasper guy, I was just like sick of watching him because in many ways he represents what I think is the failure of modern men. They think that money entitles them to everything. They think they're like, walking,
Well, we don't know
great.
anybody like that.
No comment. No comment. I'm not trying to be associated with that kind of behavior. Anyways, and it's honestly the word is in the film's context. I will say this: if they're trying to show what predatory looks like, that's predatory.
Sure.
And a lot of the men in this film are predatory, which we'll get to later. But
there's no nuance.
Yeah.
I think not all dudes are predatory, but there are definitely some predatory dudes.
And in the portrayal of that in a modern sense, I give the film credit because that is what predatory behavior looks like in many ways. You're using, like you said, your leverage in the situation to get outcomes that they don't want to do. But yes, I'll leave. What did you think of the whole dating scene or date scene? I hate saying that.
Again, I don't know what you want. Like, it's predatory behavior. It's more awkwardness. I just I can't think of like many scenes that didn't make you feel like uncomfortable in this movie.
Yeah, I guess like I'm not talking to somebody.
The other thing like that I didn't like is like when they showed her in the operating room and they were dialyzing her. I was just like, dude, it's just tough to watch like all these scenes because like there are very few scenes that just make you feel okay. So to the credit, they wanted you to make you feel uncomfortable. The film succeeded with that.
Okay, so let's get to the operations scene then, and then the final stretch. So the operations scene is obviously I was gonna let you go first, but yeah, it's basically
sure,
yeah. Basically to set it up, she gets the procedure, this day 2 of the procedure, and they don't show you like obviously the final stretch, but you get all the way up to that build up point, and yeah, it's very uncomfortable. I will say it's challenging to watch, but I think it's good to see that and how it does take courage to take the procedure, to their credit. And yeah, I mean, I felt uncomfortable. It was one of the tougher watches.
I think to your credit, what would have been more interesting, and this is where my direction of the film, I wish they had kind of gone a little bit, is remember how they ask you like, all right, so just to be clear, like, what's your date of birth, all of that. Right. Then they ask you, what procedure are you here to get? I wish he would have said like, and she says her date of birth, and she's like, I'm sorry, what was the question? I wish the film had gone in the direction, but they weren't because of a little bit of the agenda, is that, what procedure are you going to like have today? And then I wish they would have panned it to her and she kind of looked around and kind of like with a moment of like just being like her just being kind of dazed, and then they cut out. And then they eventually go to like her within the basically leaving it ambiguous, like you don't know if she went through it or not. And then you cut to her like with her cousin at the restaurant and kind of asking her about it, and she just remains vague. So you don't really know. I think that would have been a way better way to sort of end the film in a way to me.
You knew the film was not going to do that.
I know, but I would.
That's actually a good. That's a more creative ending to leave it ambiguous.
Right?
So like you leave it to your own like you fill in the blanks by your own beliefs and agenda. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I wish they would have done, because I would have been like, oh wow, I didn't like when I was watching this. I was like, okay, I was like, they could have left it more ambiguous and not taken away from anything from the film.
That's
in many ways.
That's actually good creative writing there. You should DM the director.
Do you like that alternative kind of ending a little bit better?
Yeah, because I forgot about like she says abortion, right? Like, and it's very clear. But again, to your point, I think there is an agenda with this film. And then
when I was seeing that, I was like, man, this film would have been unbelievably fantastic if they went with that kind of ending.
And then you're right, the diner scene, and they take the bus back to Pennsylvania. And that makes it a wrap, basically. We might have missed some minor details, but that's pretty much like the big sequence. So So yeah, before we get to ratings, like overall, when you watched the film and ingested it in, did anything change of your thoughts, opinions, or things that you think about differently now, like perspective wise?
Not really. I mean, this sort of just portrays how difficult it is to be someone who's in this scenario, especially somebody so young, right, and who doesn't come from a good family dynamic, um, and all of these things. I mean, it's just an unbelievably stressful kind of situation, and it sucks that when you're going through something like this and you don't have a lot of people in your corner. She had Skylar, but it's no kind of like adult kind of guiding you through this in a way. I think the closest that she had was actually the pro-life person at the Planned Parenthood, who actually voiced some concern. But I mean, that's not someone who's kind of objective in the situation, if that makes sense. Looking for her own best interest purely. Um, so I think they did a good job making you feel uncomfortable, and sort of going through someone, or like showing you through this creative lens of someone who is going through this kind of situation, which not a lot of films do. This is the first film with abortion I think I've ever seen. So I mean, at least they tackled very difficult to portray like matter, and something that's obviously pressing in today's cultural wars. But well, are we getting the final endings, or like I don't know what we're doing?
Just we're getting to the ratings.
Okay.
We're just getting. I just want to know, like, because this film is like a big topic. Is just before we jump into ratings and with all the film structure and like reviewing
Sure.
it. Like,
I mean, did it change anything? Not really. I I mean, it humanized someone who's gone through this situation, but I mean, already always like thought like this is not an easy thing to like go through. I can imagine, and it's one of the most difficult decisions I think anybody could ever make. It's kind of like how I've always viewed it.
yeah.
I don't think it's a decision anyone should make lightly, one way or the other.
Yeah, and then I guess like yeah, that's pretty much it. We just want to make sure we ask that before we get into the film reviews, because this is a big topic, and I didn't want to like just get into reviewing the film and just giving ratings. So I just want to make sure like did anything change, anything any big points, anything you did the movie raise things that you never thought before? That's the last thing I'll ask before we get into the final steps here.
No, because I knew I was trying to think if it raised anything in terms of how abortion laws are different, but I kind of recognize that it varies from state to state. No. I'm going to be honest, no. And maybe look, I've known a couple of people who've been assaulted or been through difficult situations, so it didn't really raise anything on that front. I know, life's murky, man. I think that's kind of what they were trying to show, and there's not everyone comes from the best family backgrounds. I know that. I can't say there's anything specifically the film raised that is like shocking to me in a way. Oh, I guess the one thing I didn't know for like when you're in the second trimester, it's a 2-day procedure. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
Did not know that, but I've never looked into it to that degree.
And I think soon, some states will not allow that. So
yeah.
All right, so now we can jump into final thoughts, or if you, I don't know. I've been driving a lot, so I don't know if there's anything you wanted to tackle or discuss.
No. I thought the acting was phenomenal, but most films we review, the acting is pretty good. I would say, really believable character. I think she did a good job portraying someone who just seems very isolated and kind of lost. Is the way I would describe the main character, Autumn, and desperate. I thought Skylar was good, kind of showing that she had some of the support, especially when she's getting dialyzed. And she's like that did was a little touching when they're like holding hands while she's going through the initial part of the procedure. I thought that the sort of tone, the pace of the film was good. It wasn't too long, so I'll give it credit. They kind of had these really long, drawn out shots where they keep the two characters close together to kind of show how really close they are in their relationship, which was, I think, a good touch from a directorial standpoint. I didn't like that, like you said, there was this complete emphasis that all dudes in the film were trash. It's basically kind of like how they made it seem. They were all predatory. They all had an agenda. They were all kind of like abusing women one way or the other. Not to say that there aren't men like that. It's just, it's a little too over the head in terms of the generalization of people. I also wish that they, like I raised earlier, that they had gone with the kind of ending that I said, where they left it a little bit more interpretive, up to the audience to try to figure out if she won or not saying it one way or the other. I think it wouldn't have taken away anything from the film, because it's up to that point, they still would have shown everything brutal that someone in that situation had gone through. And I think it would have been a little more realistic, because some people would have made the choice one way or the other. And so because of some of those things, I have to give the film an 8.5.
Fair. All right. So I guess
let's go soapbox.
I'm not gonna soapbox, dude. I already made my opinions very clear, and I've been under control about my actual off the camera opinions. So but I will say, there's a lot of women who don't ever come forward. Their close friends might know, but there are many that don't share it publicly. So we know that they do happen.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, unfortunately, the behavior of men in the era of social media, I'm trying to protect names here. Like, I don't want to say them because I don't want to, get on those tangents.
Go.
Has been very problematic in the last, let's say, 5-6 years. I do agree with you that the research Jonathan Haidt has done, I still find quintessential to understand our time, and the fact that people don't know who he is insulting to me. But beyond that, soapboxing, I will say, like, in terms of the film itself, I know I raised it earlier. My issue, one of the bigger issues was, like, all the male characters are pretty much, you said trash. I would say, like, just I was using a term of, like, they're the bad archetypes. And I think any pushback on that criticism, I would flip it and say, like, if you saw a film where all women or African American or Latinos,
any group of people,
where all the characters were
the most negative attributes,
negative stereotypes, would you be okay with that film? I believe those people would be tongue twisting, would say no, but they're championing this. I've read some reviews, and it's crazy, the circle jerk stuff that happens sometimes. But that's the pushback I'll give. Hey, if we did this to another group, would you be cheering it on? I don't think so. That's why I stick with that pushback pretty harshly, and I think even more harshly than you're going to expect with my score. That's one of the bigger things I have an issue with. The other thing I do have an issue with too is, to your point about your ending, great idea actually, is that it is very the portrayal is only one-sided, and even the other side, if you really nitpick the scene, they're kind of taking shots at that person too.
At who?
The pro-life clinic. They are the when she goes for the first ultrasound with the pro-life clinic, basically.
Yeah,
because they make it. The reason I say this is because they make it seem like when she goes to New York, how efficient and how to the book and professional,
how outdated their technology is, because their
exactly
sonogram was inaccurate.
Exactly. Yeah.
True.
So there is an insinuation there, which I did not like. I'm not saying that side is right. I'm not saying whatever side. I'm just saying, when we've been consistent on this pod, at least with the fact, even though we might disagree, that we don't like it when it's clear that there is disingenuine, incentive structure to paint one side versus the other. You're not following the full picture here. So that's another big.
We take shots at both sides on this pod.
Yeah, so that's another critique I have of this film. But you're right, in terms of pacing, in terms of acting, and in terms of even like the topic, and even like, look, even if they're using the bad stereotype of men, in terms of the concept of the story, it works. I can't even fault it for that. She's in the situation because the relationship with her parents, the dad's not a really good factor. The store owner one, you could argue, is a bit out of the hat a little bit. Maybe they're trying to show like
store owner. Oh,
The grocery store boss. Yeah, that's the one where I was just like, look, you give me the Jasper guy, you give me the dad, I see it. I will say that it seemed like out of place, out of the hat a
Well,
little bit.
I just don't look. I'm not saying it doesn't go on. It doesn't happen. Doesn't go on. I don't think most people, even if they're in that, I don't know. I've never worked at a grocery store. I can't fully say. I just it didn't seem super believable that it happens all the time.
Forget the grocery store. In the context of the story, did it really do anything other than demonize men?
No.
Exactly. So that's why I have added to the critique list.
No, it added nothing to it at all, really.
The dad and Jasper, yes. And
Yeah,
those are archetypes.
right.
I can say I don't, but when I'm nitpicking this film, I'm nitpicking. There's
You're
a
right.
personal
It
angle,
didn't
but I
add
can't.
anything really to the story at all.
Exactly. And so I have to hurt it there. There was a lot of things I like about this film. I do think the topic is tough to tackle. I think the hospital scenes, I haven't been told otherwise. They seem pretty accurate.
Yeah. We have to take it for face value at that.
Yeah. Well, I've also asked my mom about it. So it seems like it did not then get any pushback there. And I will say in that regard, credit, it's easy to, maybe embellish or maybe, not do it justice. So in that regard, props. And I actually, to give credit to the cousin, I thought she was really good too in this film. And her Skylar was really good.
Yep.
I actually thought all the female main characters, even some of the side characters, were pretty solid. Pretty good. And especially the main two.
Well, I thought the acting of some of the people at the Planned Parenthood clinics was really good.
Exactly. And I will leave it at that. And so, yeah, my rating is a 6 out of 10.
That might be a little harsh, but okay.
It's harsh because I go back to if we did this with I'm really hammering in on the point where if we did this with a minority group, we did this with Asians, it would not fly. It would have been attacked, and it would be worse. The ratings would be worse online, dude. So I think, unfortunately, if they, like I said, even if they had like one, just even if like there was just one minor character that was just like normal, a bus driver, hey, you need a free bus ride, like I could have I would have bumped it to 7. But honestly,
you really hammered you on that point.
I'm watching the whole film and I'm going like, okay, men are, I understand the dark archetypes. I'm a man, I get it. I'm watching the whole film going like, really? We're going to go there. We're going to go this far. We're going to go with no redeemable character. If I made a movie about that, about Latinos, I would be attacked by my own community or Asians. Come on. I mean, that's just the truth, And
yeah, man, I don't disagree with you. I guess just that shortcoming didn't quite drop the rating for me quite that bad because there were redeemable aspects of this film.
Well, I think it's also maybe to show some of my bias. I've been really digging into a lot of male-centered pop.
Try to counter those biases when you're reviewing films.
But I think the reason it really hit home with me is that I've been listening to, as you know, I've been doing a lot of research into female podcasts and also male-only podcasts. Well, male-only podcasts because like that came out naturally through our COVID year. But also I've been digging really this year into female podcasts. And I think the problem I have is this film really, I guess in many ways, maybe triggered me, is that like each side portrays the other in these archetypes and it's just blanketed. And it's like, it's just starting to get really on my nerves a little bit. Like,
kind of like a Whitney Cummings comments of why she isn't so big.
You're just saying that to trigger me, but I mean more like how there's certain male podcasts that portray all women like just pieces of meat.
With this Instagram. Total blanket, I can't watch those anymore.
And then unfortunately on the other side, I was hoping for exactly. And so when I saw this film, I was like, this is doing the same thing at a higher art form than these low-level podcasts, but it's the same thing. It's the same paintbrush, and it's just like, you gotta be kidding me. And the thing is that like for these other podcasts, if you're a porn star podcast, you're a female influencer podcast, fine. You got your market, you gotta make your bag. But for a film, and I consider film an art form, you gotta be better than that. And you're not better than the podcast I'm listening to. Sorry, I'm docking you an extra 1.5. So I think my original score would have been a 7.5, but I'm I'm hurting it on this one. So 6 out of 10.
Okay.
I stay firm. I don't back down from the haters.
Oh, all right. And with that, if you enjoyed our commentary on this very controversial film, please like and subscribe to our channel. And please let us know if you have any other film recommendations